Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for testifying. I still want to get back to 15 years because, frankly, it's the thing that disturbs me the most. The truth is that after 15 years, Iran is a nuclear threshold state. They are legitimized in this agreement as being a nuclear threshold state, which means they can produce weapons-grade, highly enriched uranium without limitation. I know you can make the argument and say, well, they are already at that point now, but why would we not try to negotiate a deal where they couldn't have those things in 15 years? I also want to mention that a nuclear agreement doesn't whitewash the fact that Iran continues to remain a destabilizing actor in the region and continues to fuel terrorism around the globe. Our friends in Israel rightfully are concerned that Iranian funding of terrorism would continue to affect them in an existential way. One of the issues I've had with this agreement is that from day one, it only focused on limits to Iran's nuclear program. With this agreement, the way I look at it, Iran's financing of terrorism will continue and could become much worse. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps could take advantage of any sanctions relief that results from an agreement between P5 plus one in Iran, because simply put, money is fungible. So I'd like to know how specifically will we work with our allies to minimize the potential windfall to terrorist organizations and protect our allies like Israel. And the other issue I want to raise is that the lifting of the arms embargo and the sanctions, the Chairman mentioned some of this, and the sanctions around Iran's ballistic missile program further destabilizes the region. I was very disappointed that these sanctions will eventually be lifted. We had been told that Iranian weapons transfers in their ballistic missile program were outside of the scope of the negotiations. So in my opinion, the changes to these sanctions should have been outside the scope as well. So what that means, when the arms embargo expires, Iran will be able to legally ship weapons to President Assad so he can continue to torture and kill his own people. So how will U.S. sanctions work to address this issue? Would the administration be open to further congressional consideration of new sanctions on Iran's arms activity and ballistic missile program? And finally, because the arms embargo and ballistic missile sanctions are not specifically mentioned in the JCPOA, only the UN Security Council resolution governing the JCPOA, would violations of the arms embargo be considered violations of the JCPOA? Does the snapback of sanctions apply to violations of the arms and missile embargoes? If Iran were to continue to ship weapons to Hezbollah before the arms embargo expires, would they be in violation of the JCPOA?
Well, Congressman, there are so many questions in there. Obviously, we're very happy to come back to you on the record. I want to answer every single one of them. But let me try to take on the biggest ones, first of all. Let me just call to everybody's attention here. The IRGC opposes this agreement. So they're not sitting there thinking they're going to get the whole world and be able to go and do what they want to do. And one of the reasons they oppose this agreement, and I invite you to talk to the intel community about that, they will document it, is that they see themselves losing the cover of the nuclear umbrella that they'd hoped to have for their nefarious activities. Now, there's nothing here to prevent us from pushing back against the IRGC and others going forward. Congressman, the Congress and others, we're all free to work together to build the pushback against the destabilizing activities. But let me ask you a simple question. Is Iran empowered more destabilizing the region with a nuclear weapon, or stripped of that ability with an international agreement it has to live up to, and then us coming in underneath with a whole set of other security arrangements and pushback? I think the answer to that is crystal clear. Now, you asked the question of what happens with respect to year 15. Folks, under the additional protocol and the modified 3.1 code, please focus on what happens. There's not some sudden break-off at the end of 15 years. They are under remarkable restraints. Specifically, the comprehensive safeguards agreement that they have to negotiate with the IAEA, which goes on forever, provides the IAEA with the right and obligation to provide safeguards on all source and special fissionable material in Iran to ensure the material is not diverted to nuclear weapons. All non-nuclear weapon states parties under the Non-Proliferation Treaty have to bring this into agreement. The Comprehensive Safeguard Agreement requires Iran to maintain detailed accounting records on all material that's subject to the safeguards, operating records on all facilities subject to the safeguards. All public facilities in their program are subject to the safeguards. It provides for a range of IAEA inspections, including verifying the location, the identity, the quantity, the composition of all nuclear materials subject to the safeguards, the design of nuclear facilities. It requires the Board of Governors to take action without delay, that's a quote, in a situation where it's essential and urgent and provides consequences for a finding of noncompliance. That's just on the side of the declared facilities. There are a whole set of requirements for access and inspection and accountability on the undeclared facilities. So, Congressman, they are forever under enormous constraints here with respect to inspections and accountability. They have to provide accountability for all the nuclear research and development activities not involving nuclear material, manufacturing or production of sensitive technology, centrifuge rotor components, construction of hot cells usable for plutonium separation, uranium mines, concentration plants, nuclear waste, all kinds of things. Now, let me let Ernie.
Well, may I suggest this, Mr. Secretary? We can respond for the record, Mr. Secretary, to the ranking member's questions. But if we could go now to Eliana Ross-Layton, and the time has expired here, and we'll just get that for the record
on the HEU,
later.
it would be an
Thank you very much, Mr.